strategic planning. I'll just pass you over to John here to do the summary.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. To all members of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the committee, which will be hybrid, conducted remotely via WebEx and physically here in the Council Chamber in the Guildhall, Tuesday, 3rd of March at 4 o'clock. Alderman Cook.
Online, John.
Alderman Hussey. Alderman Kerrigan.
Online, John.
Councillor Sandra Duffy.
Apologies, John.
Okay. Councillor Farrell. Councillor Harkin. Councillor Hart.
Shaw, Erlina, John.
Councillor Jackson.
Shaw.
Councillor Leonard.
Shaw, Erlina.
Councillor McDaid. Councillor McGinley.
Shaw, Erlina, John.
Councillor Mooney. Councillor Tierney. And Councillor Nealis.
Sure.
Thank you, members.
I'll just take you through the broadcasting statement. I would like to remind everyone physically present at this meeting or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council privacy notice may be found on the Council website. Okay, so just do a declarations of members' interest. No, I'm not online either. Okay, so our first agenda item today is to welcome Mr. Paul Gosling here. And Paul is here today to give us an update on his book, A 10-Year Plan for a United Ireland. Paul, you're very welcome. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and then once you're finished, we'll take questions and we'll do them in sets and then we'll come back to you, okay? So Lanarei, go ahead.
Firstly, many thanks indeed for the invitation. If I put a bit of context here, the reason as much as anything for the inspiration for this book was I gave a presentation to the Shannon a couple of years ago, and it seemed to me that all the senators that were present assumed that a united Ireland would involve retention of Stormont as it was, and all that would change would be basically the national anthem and the flag, possibly, and that was it. Well, that's not my view about how things will develop with a new Ireland, a united Ireland. Next slide, please. So thanks, as I say, for the invitation. Just a bit of context about who I am. I'm a journalist and author of many years standing. I'm a former advisor within Stormont to Sinead McLaughlin, but currently I have no party affiliation. I am also a former councillor in England for the Labour and Cooperative parties. And as you know, I'm author of A New Ireland. Next slide, please. The reason why otherwise I've written this is that basically that Stormont does not work, it cannot work, and it solidifies division because of the structures that is used. There are elsewhere similar structures that are used. Some of those work, Switzerland in particular, but typically they work if they've got strong levels of devolution. We clearly do not have strong devolution in Northern Ireland, as I'm sure you as councillors would agree. Or else it is used as a step towards a more lasting solution. Next slide, please. So the problems we have with Stormont include, or particularly, I think, that difficult decisions are not taken, they're avoided. I mean, obviously, Bengoa and the Health Service, published in 2016, still not implemented properly. Education reform has not been implemented, I would suggest, though clearly some people would disagree with me. But academic selection leads to significant numbers of people not having the quality of education and skills and qualifications that they need for activity in the labour market, and that leads to high levels of economic inactivity and a low employment rate. I notice a couple of people in the last few days from the unionist background have talked about the very low unemployment rate we have in Northern Ireland, which is statistically true, but is misleading because the employment rate is very low because we've got high levels of economic inactivity, often related to health waiting lists and also low qualifications, caring duties, lack of childcare facilities. So we have all those problems in Northern Ireland. They are much less severe within the south, and largely, to a large extent, they've changed their education system to get much better outcomes. We also still have problems within policing. We do not have a balanced police force, and in particular, in terms of the civilian staff, what is it, 80% almost of the civilian staff come from a Protestant background. We have large numbers of people from the RUC that are still working with the PSNI. So we are not there where we need to be in terms of policing. With environment, obviously with Loch Ness, we're not where we need to be. And in terms of water infrastructure, we've got massive capital spending backlogs, which mean we're not able to construct. We've got problems in terms of actually achieving what we need to do in terms of the university as well over the water infrastructure problems, both water supply and sewage. Next slide, please. If you compare Northern Ireland with the Republic, the skills level in the south, as I've already referred, is much higher. We have much higher percentages of graduates, stronger technical skills. So it's not just about people going to university, it's also getting the practical professional skills that they need as well. Northern Ireland has a higher percentage of people without qualifications and also a very high rate of early school leaving. In terms of health, the Republic has shorter waiting lists, but only about half the population in the south has some level of free healthcare, and many of those do not have completely free healthcare. We had a conference at the Hollywood Trust last week, which indicated very high levels of support amongst the local population for partnerships to improve health, so that we actually have a cross-border healthcare system in the Northwest. At the moment, we have very limited cross-border partnerships. In terms of social welfare, the Republic is more generous than the North. The Republic is also more socially liberal, which is, for me, very important. Clearly, the Republic is far from perfect, but it does provide a platform from which development can proceed. Next stage, please. Next slide, please. So what we also have to recognise in the Northwest is that Derry is particularly damaged by partition. It's been separated from its natural hinterland. The border areas across the whole of the border, with the possible exception of Newry Dundalk, underperform. The Northwest is the poorest region on both sides of the border, and Brexit has changed dynamics to increase cross-border trade, but as the most recent statistics show, we are still massively disadvantaged in the Northwest. Clearly, one of the problems we have to address in terms of planning for the future is the scale of subvention, but actually the challenge in a sense is defining what the level of subvention is. Professor John Doyle calculates it's around 2.5 billion. The Republic puts it at 7 billion if you take out the expenditure on things that are not directly related to Northern Ireland. But the UK's Office for National Statistics calculates it at £14.5 billion. So when we're talking about preparation, clearly defining the subvention is a really important issue. In terms of where we're going to be, in terms of any possible subvention, it actually depends on very many things at the moment that are imponderable. So yes, we know about the allocation of UK costs will have to be defined, but there's also things about the pension liabilities, who's going to take those in United Ireland, also the value of assets, where they are divided, who gets them, and the share of debt. Next slide, please. So what else needs to be considered in terms of the future? And I'll wind up here now, Chair, in a moment. So firstly, what level of devolution should we have? Neither the South nor the North has the level of devolution that perhaps you'd want for a modern state. Also, related directly to that is what powers local government should have within that, and obviously also the boundaries we should have. Clearly, in terms of the Northwest, we need to have a stronger Northwest region defined that is cross-border as it's currently identified. We need to accommodate British identity, I would argue. Someone who's a Brit, you'd expect me to say that, but a lot of people do not want a British identity in a future Ireland. I would suggest that that is implausible. We have to recognise there is a British identity that will survive partition. So we also have to decide on the speed of integration, but also we need, as I say, clarity on the subvention. And we also need to recognise that because of the nature and detail of the Good Friday Agreement, that we will not lose some form of partition beyond unity, unless actually we reach an agreement on terms of right of British citizenship and also the issues around pension. There's quite a strong chance that some level of partition will continue beyond unity. So we also, I think, need to decide what we want from a new Ireland. It's not going to be simply a continuation of the Republic. It will be a new state with a new constitution. And we need to actually start thinking, what do we want that new Ireland to be? To what extent should we reflect things in the tradition of the two states, but also what we want in terms of our beliefs as a state? Thank you.
Very good, Paul. Thanks for that. I'm just going to open it up now to the floor. If anybody has any questions or comments they'd like to make. Councillor Jackson?
Good Chair, and thanks, Paul, for the presentation, and thanks for the work that was put on to the book in terms of preparing for unity. And I think more and more people are getting involved in this discussion. More and more people are realizing and acknowledging that there is a better future available. There's another way. And a lot of it is, particularly here in the north, a lot of it is down to what you've highlighted. Partition hasn't worked. Partition doesn't work. And no matter how hard and that we try and work on a daily basis, they deliver public services. There's a growing realization that as long as we are dependent on decisions taken in London around our public services, as long as we are reliant on a block grant delivered by the millionaires in Britain, and as long as we are curtailed in terms of as you've outlined, the lack of powers that have been devolved, the local elected representatives, we're always going to be faced with the challenges. Doesn't mean that we don't continue to work. I know from this chamber, we have been able to achieve quite a lot. Particularly, I know you pay close attention to what we're able to deliver as part of the city deal, but it could be so much bigger. It could be so much better, and people deserve better. People deserve a brighter future than what we've had for the last 100 years or more. So I'm delighted that more and more people like yourself are writing theses, writing books, and informing the public and sparking conversations. I suppose from our perspective, and I'm speaking as a local council, what should we be doing more to strengthen those relationships, particularly at a cross-border level? What should we be doing to provide a platform for those who want to have the discussion around the brighter future, those that want to help design what a new Ireland will look like? Because I know there's quite a lot of speculation. There's quite a lot of discussion. I know what I would like to see in a reunited country. I know it might differ from other people in this chamber. So, and then I suppose when we get out and the general public, people will have all our priorities, all our ideas, and we do have a blank page. We do have an opportunity that's available to us now that generations before us didn't have. So this is an opportunity to try and get it right. And unless we have a government in the 26 counties that's preparing properly, calling citizens' assemblies and help shape what a new Ireland could look like, we need to look at what we're doing at a council level to help prepare for that. So I suppose my question is what do you feel that we could be doing? We have an Irish Unity or Constitutional Change Working Group where we're building strengthening the links that currently exist with our neighbouring council in Donegal. But I know from speaking to people that attend that working group regularly, there's an appetite to do so much more. So it's just to pick your brain, given that you've got a keen interest in the subject. What's your advice to us as a council in terms of what we should be doing going forward? Thanks, Chair.
Carmega, Councillor Jackson, and next we'll take Councillor Minnie.
Thank you, Chair, and say thank you to Paul for coming in. And I did have an opportunity to read his book, and last year I did attend a talk on the waterside in August, which was very, very helpful. Paul was on the panel along with other members, and I thought that was very helpful. But in reading the book, and I think looking at it, it's another welcome addition to the panoply of literature that's out there at the moment in relation to reunification, and it's a welcome addition. But the one thing that struck me was, I think, reading through it and probably reading through other similar commentary over the past while is, and I'm just really probably digging down on one specific aspect in relation to this, Paul, is the question of Stormont, because obviously since the partition, we've had structures pre-1972 and suppose post-1972. But if we're going to move into a reunification process, and looking at your chapter 2, in which I rightly agree with you, dysfunctional Stormont, how likely do you think the idea of Stormont being retained or some structure of it being retained is likely going forward into a reunified country? Because reading your chapter and your book and other commentary I've read over the past while, it doesn't seem to be a viable motion or notion to float in any sort of reasonable sense. So I know you've mentioned it just briefly there, but would you have anything further to say? Thank you, Paul.
Carmega, Councillor Minnie, and Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you, Paul, for coming in today to share your thoughts. And I think that your book and the numerous editions of it are a very good contribution to the discussion about ending partition and a united Ireland. I think that there is a lot in there. Just on your point about Stormont and its continued existence, I mean, I think we can see now, and I think most people can see, that this is an institution that just cannot deliver. People are managing it right now, but they're managing a crisis, and it is just not going to work, no matter how many reforms, I believe, are introduced. It is just not a political institution that can meet the needs of people across the north. And I think there's growing frustration with that, and it'll only continue to grow, I think, as we move forward. So I don't think that there's a case to keep Stormont in a federal united Ireland. And I think that the issue of that will have to be addressed through discussions in advance. So I think that there should be a constituent assembly on an all-Ireland basis to basically allow people from across the island to give their thoughts, to debate and to take votes, if necessary, on what a future Ireland could look like. And I think that issue would be part of it, because if we're creating a new state and it's going to be a transformational state, we have to try and begin that process in advance. So that's one thing, if you want to share your thoughts on it, because I think that's important. The second one is, look, I think that Westminster is a capitalist parliament. It is ruled by billionaires. Its policies are decided by billionaires and warmongers. And once again, Starmer has demonstrated his cowardice when it comes to standing up to US imperialism and Israel by basically, through a back door, defending British participation in the unjustified attack in Iran. So I think that everything about Westminster is elitism and rotten, and I think that it's not an institution that cares about people from any background or community here in the north of Ireland or across the island. But I don't think that it's good enough to say we need a break from Westminster. We need a break from capitalism. And so my concern about some of the discussions in terms of the South is that in a lot of ways, the South is actually a more vicious form of capitalism at the minute, because it's based on a tax haven economy for major American corporations. And I don't think that that's a model that will benefit people anywhere on the island of Ireland, in the Falls and the Shankill and Craigan or the Bogside or in the fountain. So I think that there needs to be, in my opinion, much more discussion about that in terms of redistribution of wealth to make the idea of a united Ireland attractive to, I would say, the vast majority of people. You know, an Ireland based on the southern version where there's huge profits for multinationals might be very attractive to elites, but I'm not sure it'll be attractive to people who might be inclined in particular not to vote for United Ireland because of history and because of what the schools they might have went to. So that's a question really. And then I don't think that we can assume that given what's happening in the world right now, that American corporations will just continue to look at Ireland in the way that it has been treated through the years of the peace process and going back to the 60s. So I think there's a very uncertain world. So calculating that we can kind of depend on tax receipts in the south, leading for being the 10% of companies in the south funding 90% of tax receipts for a future United Ireland, I don't think that is one that we can depend on. So if you want to share your thoughts on that, I'd be more than welcome to hear them.
Chair Margaret, Councillor Horgan. Paul, I'll stop there and let you respond to those three speakers and then we'll come back in, okay?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a lot of very important and interesting points there. If I start with Councillor Jackson, you mentioned at some point demand for cross-border unity and services. If I can just reference the opinion poll survey that was done through the Hollywood Trust project that I was working on, 68% of respondents believe that the region should be officially recognised by the UK and Irish governments as one economic region. 84% believe that we should have an integrated cross-border approach to health services. 90% believe we should have an integrated cross-border approach to transport infrastructure. 84% we should have a cross-border approach to environmental and ecological management, and more than half believe we should have a simplification and harmonisation of the tax benefits and pensions rules for employment on the two sides of the border. So I think that shows, and I have to say that the support levels in parts of Derry were very, very high, and in Ishowen, they're very, very high, and those are the combined results. So I think that shows that people want, at the very least, a pragmatic approach to the border. Not necessarily for all of them unity, but there's certainly a desire for recognising that we've got common interests on the two sides of the border, and we need to move forward with that. But you did mention, and several people mentioned, the issue about devolution and what type of federation we have in the future. And that, I think, is one of the things that need to be considered in detail over the next period. And I have to say, as an English person who did on a freelance basis significant amount of work for the regional assemblies in England, we have to recognise the experience of England as a warning to us, because in the end, that approach failed, not just because of the austerity of the Cameron government, but also because there wasn't that level of support amongst the population for what was seen as an unnecessary level of devolution. So if we want to have a federated structure, then we need to have a conversation about what sort of powers would be devolved and to whom and how it'd be constructed. But clearly, as Sean said, Stormont does not work. And it is constituted in a way that I don't believe it can ever work. But in addition to which, if we have a federated structure of, say, 4 regions, why the hell would we have a 6-county Ulster? I mean, so these are things we have to talk about, but given the history of partition, do people in Monaghan and Cavan actually want to be involved in an Ulster assembly? Perhaps this situation is different for Donegal, but these are things that we need to have a sensible conversation about before we have a border poll. And I do not believe we're going to have a border poll in the next couple of days. But I think touching on the issue about cross-border cooperation, we need to look back on the Good Friday Agreement, which specified a number of areas that were agreed between the participants for cross-border cooperation and partnership, a large number of which, several of which, did not make themselves into cross-border bodies. So we've got that gap. And if you're asking me what I think that we should be working on in terms of those partnership arrangements for the future, it's looking at the gap between what was agreed in principle and what was converted into agreement in terms of creating those agencies. And environmental management would have been one of those things. So I think there's a lot of scope there. Councillor Mooney's talked about the regional weakness. I've touched on that as well. And clearly, Stormont should not be retained. I'm very disappointed. I won't point fingers at any particular party, but I'm very disappointed that I've heard senior members of one party that I would have thought would recognise that Stormont is a complete failure, talking about retaining Stormont. Now, whether they are thinking about that as a transitional measure or whether they're thinking about it as a permanent measure, it's unclear to me. I've heard also some unionists say that it's really important to recognise that Stormont would have a role. That's what John Taylor was saying the other day. But equally, you have to recognise that the current constitutional structure of Stormont means that it cannot work. The mutual veto means that you cannot make difficult decisions. And that's most obvious with the need to reform the health service, but it's not just about that. So I'm agreeing very much with what Sean has said there. And I think I've touched on what his point talk about federation and devolution. In terms of the economic model of Ireland, we are not going to have a border poll in the next few weeks. We don't know what the economic situation of Ireland will be at the time we have the border poll. A lot of things are up in the air. They change week by week, including the attacks on Iran, the potential crisis in the oil and gas supply markets. So we just do not know. Whether Ireland has got a future with its existing model, I think, and this goes way beyond what we can talk about here, Ireland is going to have to consider what it means by neutrality, how it develops relationships with the European Union, what type of relationship it has with the European Union, and the European Union is going to have to think much more about how it can be independent from the other major powers within the world. And given the pressures, in particular from Hungary and Slovakia as well, there's going to be serious questions about how the European Union goes forward.
Thanks, Paul. All right, so we have Councillor Farrell next.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Paul, for coming today. I think it's really refreshing, David Englishman in this chamber, making the case for Irish unity. In your slides, you had mentioned and referenced, the different standards of living, north and south. You're quoting better education outcomes, better health outcomes, better social welfare, stronger economy, membership of the EU, far better GDP per capita. A lot of the arguments around unification are going to come down to the costs. And one of the memories of Brexit was about we give £350 million a week to the EU. That could be spent in our NHS. That's what's stuck in my mind. So in terms of the cost of unity or the cost of a new Ireland, we've got various estimations. We had Professor Doyle here in November, and you're quoting that he's saying it's going to cost 2.4 billion a year. The Irish government are predicting 7 billion a year. British statisticians are saying it's going to be double that. What's your view? Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Paul, for coming here today and joining in this conversation with the Council. I think it's fair to say that there is lots of momentum building and has been building since Brexit around the possibility of reunification here in the North. And it's conversations like this, the book, and other discussions that are going on in communities and right across the North that is encouraging that. Paul, I wonder, do you believe that there is similar momentum in the South around the possibility of reunification, and particularly within the current Irish government in terms of preparation for Irish unity? And I know Councillor Jackson's question was around what do we as a council do, or what can we do to prepare for unity? But if you, like me, agree that there's not much momentum within the Irish government around unity, what should we do, or what could we do in your view to try and force that issue and make the Irish government actually act on the wishes of the people here in the North? Thank you.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you. Yes. Rory Farrell, yes. I saw some figures today that were sent to me about Derry's position in terms, Derry and Strabhan's position in terms of comparison with other councils across the United Kingdom. We are near the bottom of lots of those charts. Child poverty, for example, and this goes back to what Sean was saying about the Irish model. Yes, we can be critical, and I'd also regard myself as a socialist, but just not in the same way as Sean. But we can be very critical about inequality within the South. But actually, it's a very much more equal society than we have in the UK, including within Northern Ireland. And you can see that in terms of where we are with child poverty. It is absolutely disgraceful in terms of where we are. And also the levels of social support in terms of access to the employment market. And we are a long way away from where we should be. The Irish government has reconstituted elements of its state that make things very much better. It's moving towards a better, more equal structure within the health service. Yes, it is not perfect, but ours actually has a two-tier structure where you are not going to be seen unless you pay in lots of circumstances. We are a million miles away from where we should be in terms of health. So I would say, yeah, the Irish government is clearly some distance away, but it has massively reformed its education system. And so, yes, it is partly about tax policy that has driven the economic success of the South. But to a large extent, it's because of labour market reforms in terms of educating people to fill the jobs that are needed. So, that's why it's not just about tax. Yes, they've benefited from tax policy. Yes, it's sucked it away from the United States in ways that Trump is very unhappy with, but it's other things. I know Rory asked about subvention. Yes, this is a very big question mark. And it's not a big question mark because we're not thinking about it. It's because we don't have the answers. So yes, John is making certain assumptions. John Fitzgerald in the South is making very different assumptions. And to a large extent, those assumptions are based on who is going to pick up the bill for state pensions for people living in Northern Ireland. Now, as things stand, living in Northern Ireland, my pension is paid for by the British government. If I go across the border into Donegal, then I will still be paid for by the British government, but limited to the level that I get at the point I retire, not constantly uprated. So the question then is, if the British government would say it's not going to pay British pensions to people once we have unity, what about people who've moved to Greece? Or what about people who've moved to Donegal? I mean, there's a level of inconsistency. When John Fitzgerald says, well, the British government will simply refuse to pay for state pensions after unity, and the Irish government will have to do it, to me, that doesn't make sense. However, that is the assumption that the Scottish government made when it negotiated its independence referendum. So there is, if you like, an assumption there that the arrangements made by the Scottish government are the ones that would apply here. We don't have clarity. And of course, what we have to recognise is the Scottish government was in a very weak negotiating position at the time, and it agreed to things that it otherwise wouldn't have done just in order to get the referendum over the line. So those are core things. And what I say about state pensions applies to a lesser extent in a different way, but much the same way in terms of public sector pensions. Who will pick up the pensions bill? Then there's other things like, do we pay our share of the national debt? But if we do pay our share of the national debt, surely we should then get our share of the national assets. So it's those things that are nitty-gritty that we don't have an answer about. And when you see different assumptions about the size of subvention, it's because people are making different assumptions about how it's constituted in the future. So that's a core element before we have a unity referendum. We have to have clarity around that. And some people would clearly prefer that we don't. Brian asks whether there's momentum in the South for unity. Clearly not. Absolutely not. However, it would be unreasonable, I think, to say that the Irish government is not preparing. It is not overtly preparing. The work that's being done by the Economic and Social Research Institute is very important. And some of the work they've done, the research they've done, shows very clearly the differences in quality of life, quality of public services between the two states. And to go back to Sean's point, it shows consistently that the South does better than the North. In many ways, I won't go as far as to say we're a failing state or to say what some other people have said about it, but we are not performing to the level that we should be as a modern state. We are just not making the decisions. We are not achieving what we should be. And actually, the South does a much better job of government than the North does. And as it happens, the South does a better job of government than Westminster does. If you look at preparations for Brexit, the South was fully prepared for Brexit, and Westminster, Cameron, made a conscious decision not to prepare on the assumption if you don't prepare, it won't happen. Well, that's pretty stupid, isn't it? And what can the council do? Touch on what I've said before, which is to go back to the Good Friday Agreement and ask yourself, what did the Good Friday Agreement apparently offer us, which has not been achieved? And it offers us a much better deal in terms of cross-border cooperation than we are achieving at the moment. If we want to have the Northwest as an economic powerhouse, rather than an economic, I won't say failure, but something that performs much less well than it should do, then what we need to do is to get the Irish government in particular to recognise we are going to get much more out support from the Irish government than from anywhere else in terms of making the Northwest region work. And the Irish government needs to recognise, as some of the people in the Irish government do, that actually it is only by making Derry work well that they'll get Donegal to work well.
Thanks. We have Alderman Kerrigan online.
Apologies, Chair. Difficulty there, trying to get myself unmuted. No, thank you for letting me in, Chair. I thank Paul for bringing a presentation. I may not concur with many of his comments, but he went through his presentation in a manner that he was concise, and he has his viewpoints there in regards to it. But I do apologise to him if I missed his response, because it was a concern that I had, and a question I had. I think that Councillor Harkin touched on it, and I see the slides that are there. It's in regards to the how much weight has he placed in regards to the amount of money that comes into the Republic of Ireland from these foreign multinationals, and the fact that effectively their revenue stream is based on that. You know, it's the amount of income that's coming in there, and their GDP is effectively based. I mean, is it the top 10 multinational firms based in the Republic of Ireland, or who are declaring income in the Republic of Ireland, are almost accounting for 60% of the revenue brought into the state. So it's just the basis of that then, because if there is an impact on that, I suppose it's a question in that regard. But as I say, I apologise if he has raised that answer. I just lost a wee bit of connection there, and I might have missed that. I did pick up some of his responses on the first line of questions, Chair. And there was one other thing is, our party position would be that we would all seek to work together, those within the executive parties that are there at Stormont, to seek to try and improve the place that we are in here today. One of the comments has been stated, and Paul stated there, there's no, according to him, and my view would be, there's no, there's going to be no border poll done in the immediate future, or anywhere in the future, in my view, in regards to, you know, this year, next year, or any time shortly. So we've got to work with what we've got, and it is seeking to try and do the best that we can for our constituents across Northern Ireland. And I know, Chair, to be fair, that is above our pay grade. That is the MLAs in that regard. But again, we as those that represent in the same parties as those, and those that sit in the executive, it is to seek that we can do the best we can to make this place work. So just a comment, Chair, but to say if he's already answered, apologise about that. Thank you.
No, I'll bring Paul back in there if he wants to reply to that.
Thank you. Yes, Alderman Kerrigan makes very good points. We don't know what the future is of the Irish economy. It is dependent on foreign direct investment, but I would assert strongly that the FDI is not simply attracted by low tax, but also by a strong labour base and the quality of research and development that takes place within the South. But equally, can I suggest we don't know what the future is for the UK economy? I'm sure I'll upset some people by saying it, but I'll say it anyway, which is, as a Brit, I can say that I regard the United Kingdom as the declining remnants of an empire. And when empires fade, they fade gradually, but without really stopping their decline. And that feels to me what is broadly happening with the British economy. It's in crisis, it's in ongoing crisis. Whether the UK or the Irish economy is in a stronger position over the medium term, I think is probably beyond the scope of this conversation. But I mean, I think it's a very interesting question. I am not positive about the prospects for the British economy. I think the European economy is likely to do better over the medium term than the UK economy if it stays outside of the European Union. But that is my opinion. And as I said before, we are not about to have a poll. Obviously, I believe at some point we will have a poll on Irish unity. And it's as we get closer to that that we'll be able to have a more considered view about whether the Irish and European economy or whether the British economy is in a stronger position. Can Stormont work? Yes, I do agree very much with one thing you said there, which is that we do need to do what we can. I would assert that it's clearly in unionists' best interest to make Stormont work, to say to the British government and the British people that actually Northern Ireland isn't a drain on the UK. It is actually for the UK's total benefit to keep Northern Ireland within the UK. And I would say to Republicans and nationalists that, to touch on what Brian was saying there about the lack of perhaps of enthusiasm within the South for Irish unity, we need to get Northern Ireland to work in a better way than it is at the moment to tell people in the South that we're not an economic basket case and we're not going to bankrupt the southern state if they take us over. So actually, if you're being rational about it, it is in everybody's interest to make Stormont work. The problem is the one thing that more than else is absent from Stormont is rationality.
Okay, I don't see any more. Councillor Harkin, just 2 more minutes, all right?
Thanks, Paul, for coming back and all that. And just on the poll, because you've mentioned a few times that you don't see a prospect of a border poll happening anytime soon. And we discussed a bit about momentum in the South. And I think I mean, maybe if you want to develop what you were arguing about the Irish government preparing for it, I don't see a lot of evidence in that. I see that they're trying to do other things to stay away from the discussion. But I do think in the South in particular, maybe it's a newer generation coming through who are thinking about these issues more, but that there is an excitement about talking about ending partition for a generation. And I think the issue of if there's a date set, I think that will just change the discussion completely, because people then will start thinking concretely about not just the getting rid of a kind of border that exists on paper or as it does now, but people can begin to think about what a new Ireland would look like. So I think that would be a momentum changer. And then obviously we've got the problem of like the British government having the ability at the minute to decide when a border poll would be called. So I suppose the question, maybe if you want to give your thoughts on it, is how do we pressure the British government into a situation where they would be thinking, or they would feel compelled to start talking more concretely about when, and similarly with the Irish government, take a more positive view of when a referendum would be held.
Sorry, Paul, Councillor Jackson has a comment too, and then that'll be it, and you can come back at both of them. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. And I suppose when indicated, Paul just sort of covered my last point, because I did want to stress that fact that whilst a border poll, and I would concede to that point, I wish it was different, but a border poll isn't happening in the coming weeks, and it is important for us to ensure that we grow our economy, that we provide a bright future, despite the constraints that partition is imposed and has imposed on this region. We need to be doing everything we can to grow our economy, to build our economy, to create a bright future for people, and again strengthen the argument with our neighbours in other parts of the island, that we've got, like people in the 26 counties, we have a skilled workforce. We've got something to offer, because I certainly believe that we do. I certainly believe in self-determination. I trust the people of Ireland to take the right decisions. So it's to sell that and have confidence in ourselves. So we do need to make things work, and we need to be exploring every single opportunity that's available to us. And the partnership working across the border is vital. On Councillor Tierney's point around what we can do to influence the government in the 26 counties, because it is extremely frustrating that the preparation or the overt preparation, as you've outlined, Paul, hasn't, it's not there. But the pressure is being put on the Dublin government, that coalition government, and no more so than the presidential election, where we've seen like-minded parties come together and work together and demonstrate that there's an alternative to the people of the 26 counties. That worked, and that message has got through to that Dublin government. And so if we can continue that partnership working with other political parties, and it's certainly something from our party we're committed to do, and they demonstrate and put pressure on the current government that has a cosy relationship for the last 100 years, that there is a realistic alternative, and people will demand it and insert that change unless the government wake up. And I can see that momentum building in the 26 counties on the back of the presidential election. So there's that pressure happens if the SDLP want to join with us and operate in the 26 counties, all the better, because we do need everybody facing in the same direction if we're going to achieve what the future that all of us want. Thanks.
All right, Paul.
Thank you. I've for years now been saying, well, the border poll will be in about 10 years' time, and it sort of like seems to constantly move away. I'm not one of those people that says that we should have a border poll on a set date in 2030. I simply think, as someone who advocates for Irish unity, it's too soon. I don't believe we'll win if we have it in 2030, and I want it to happen at a time that we win rather than lose. In terms of attitudes amongst the Irish government, Micheál Martin is very conservative about it. I think there's a strong chance that Jim O'Callaghan will be the next leader, and that he will be much more enthusiastic and take things forward. In terms of the British government's attitude, well, it depends who's in power. I don't expect Keir Starmer to win the next election. I don't expect Kemi Badenoch to win the next election. I think as things stand, either we get a coalition that's very uncomfortable, or we get Reform UK as the new government. Reform UK is essentially an English nationalist party. I suspect whatever Nigel Farage has said one day of the week or another day of the week, that actually they would be entirely happy to lose Northern Ireland. So I think the dynamics in terms of what happens within Britain are very significant in terms of what happens in the future. And we've touched several times about attitudes within the South. The comment that Leah Varek, I think, made is that support for Irish unity is broad but shallow. And that seems to me to be accurate. And in a sense, it's about what the cost is, and we don't really know what the cost is. It's also about fear, about whether it's going to stir paramilitary anger and street action. And we've seen what's happened in Ballymena in particular about street action, which is connected to paramilitaries. And so there are a lot of things we need to do about reconciliation. That doesn't mean we put a brake on negotiations because of the fears about irreconcilables, but we do need to bring people together. And it would be very helpful if people didn't say, for example, that we will eradicate British identity within a united Ireland. Clearly, Brits are here, and they need to be respected and accepted, even though we need to, more than anything, respect the traditions of Ireland within a new Ireland.
Carmela Mayagat, Paul, that was really beneficial. And as this conversation of referendum does begin to gather pace, it's really beneficial to have people such as yourself and here giving us an insight. So thank you very much for coming in today, and thank you for giving up your time.
Sure.
All right.
The plastic cups, I know, I know. Oh, you missed it.
Thanks very much, Trevor.
Okay, moving on to our second deputation. So bhfuil fáilte a chur raibh anna dtithe ó Fullside Developments le nuas an rahan a hort don na bháil an tógra forbatha stitch in time. So I would like to welcome representatives from Foyle Developments here today to update members on the stitch in time development proposal. Okay, so just like Paul there, you have 10 minutes for speaking, and then we'll just open it up to the floor.
Cormac, Chris. Thanks to John, Kieran and Rachel for inviting us along today. Thank you to members for taking the time out to hear our presentation. So, Stitch in Time project is part of the Peace Plus projects. It's part of the local growth or local action plan for Foyleside. That's one of 3 projects, and currently GDA are leading on it. It's probably been the first one to hit the ground running back in June 24. So yep, so I'll just take you through it now. So next slide, please.
Just to fill the awkward silence, should have introduced you both. We have Adrian Kelly and Francine Moore in here today, so you're both very welcome.
So just the background of the project. So the project, as I said, was part of our co-design process in Foyleside. We identified that during the conflict there was a sizable amount of PEL residents that had left, but there still remained a number of PEL residents living locally within Rosemount and the Glen. So we looked to increase the participation amongst the current residents and older residents that may have left. So we did that through a range of projects. So there was 8 cross-community fun days held across the city. So there you'll see in the photograph on an Irish Street, Lincoln Courts, Rosemount and the Glen. There's been 16 community tea dances. The top 2 photographs you'll see there's actually ones that were held in the factory itself back in Christmas in 24. And there's been 8 historical visits to significant landmarks across the north. So Enniskillen Castle, the Hollow O'Neill, and stuff like that. So we've also been currently in the production of a historical video reflecting on the shirt factory industry within Rosemount and also the life of Rosemount and tales and kind of reflections on what it was like living up and growing in that area. We've also, what we're on here today to talk about is the production of our business case on the proposal of a community ownership of a Rosemount factory. So next slide, please. So just a bit about the Rosemount factory, and I'm looking out here and kind of don't need to really tell all reasons about the factory. So it's an iconic 4-story red brick building located on Rosemount Avenue at the top of Brook Park. It was built in 1904, it's strategically positioned, providing a view of the city. A significant part of the dairy's industry heritage. The factory is one of the last remaining shirt factories to fully have realised its potential development opportunities. Currently, it houses a number of businesses such as a car wash, P Recovery, the off licence of bar, Vineyard Church, Northwest Folk Collective, Phoenix Football Club, and Dura Dressmakers. In previous years, there's been a number of community projects delivered within the factory. These have included Outer West Neighbourhood Partnership Offices, the Factory Community Gym, St Mary's Boxing Club and Craft. The Outer West Cultural Project was part of the 2013 City of Culture programme. Next slide, please. So as part of our consultation, Glen Development Initiative as a lead partner, carried out a partnership with the Village Community Hub and Ballymagorty Hazelbank Community Partnership, undertook a community consultation to determine the needs within the area to address the viability of purchasing the Rosemount factory as part of a community wealth building initiative. Residents and organisations were invited to have an opportunity to contribute to the process through one-to-one conversations, completing an online consultation document, by visiting one of the consultation information events, or by the engagement of staff from GDIE on a door-to-door survey. The consultation events were held in BHCP offices, the Village Community Hub and Glenview Community Centre. Next slide, please.
Okay, so as a result of the public consultation then, this is a list of the priorities from residents across that Foyleside area. So you can see there arts and culture, community development, support for social aspects, education and health services, development of social enterprises within the factory, accommodation, and that's mostly specifically for students, heritage, and restaurants and other services like that. Next slide, please. So this is probably the most important and longest slide. So this is really where, from that consultation, GDI and the partners in Foyleside, including BHCP and Rosemount, have developed this business plan as part of Foyleside development for the local growth partnership. So the first key thing is the project is looking at community wealth building. So ultimately, the main focus of this project is the purchase and redevelopment of the factory. And ultimately, it's expected then from that community ownership that there would be a community wealth asset of up to £5 million would be created. The business case clearly shows projections of unrestricted revenue streams of between 400 and 500,000 K per year. And ultimately that would provide services and programmes back within the local community. So it was reinvesting it back in the community. Ultimately, the main aim is that we create community ownership of the factory. So obviously that building, as Adrian has said, has significant historical and cultural and community significance within the area and the district, not just the local area. And ultimately, it would be having community ownership to benefit the whole community rather than a private interest or private company owning the facility. And ultimately, this would allow the community sector to identify the needs that residents have already initially shown within the consultation, but also then to design and deliver other responses to community needs and address resource inadequacies in the area and address additional needs. Because then it would be community owned, it will provide the opportunity for community organisations within that area to have access to increased unrestricted revenue. And that ultimately means that it leaves communities more self-sufficient, and it means that there would be less over-reliance on public funding, and therefore it would free up funding for other areas and for other projects that are currently underfunded. In terms of physical infrastructure, the initiative would see a 5-fold increase in the physical community infrastructure within that area where we already have scarce resources. One of the key aspects of the project would be the development of a social enterprise hub and support for establishment and development of social enterprises and other businesses. That would include physical purpose-built units along with administration, financial and mentoring support for residents and other people. In terms of supporting the McGee expansion, the project would also provide modern and comfortable student accommodation, and that would obviously address the issue with HMOs in the area where it would be appropriate accommodation that is appropriately managed. So it's managed accommodation rather than individual accommodation that is not completely managed. We'll just put it that way. In terms of community cohesion, the factory will be a community hub for Outer West and Foylside, and ultimately this is one of the key projects where all community organisations have come together, and we're all here as a united front with one voice for the Foylside DA. Additional to the business, additional proposal is that we would develop a shirt factory museum, and that's proposed to support the development of a heritage museum dedicated to the history of shirt factories and the story of Rosemount. And it also will develop skills for local residents as well. Key to the business case as well would be employment and training. So one of the key benefits of the project will be creation of employment and also training opportunities. And obviously the factory is on the periphery of several large industrial estates, and will provide training to meet future requirements of potential employers. And there will be a minimum of 4 units to provide employment opportunities. The business case clearly outlines that there would be 20 employment posts created in the community enterprise sector based within the factory. And there's an outline of the posts such as Chief Executive, Housing Officer, Social Enterprise posts, Finance Admin Officer, Community Development Coordinators, Community Development Officers, Social Enterprise and Trades posts, and then obviously Maintenance and Upkeep and Cleaning personnel as well. Next slide, please.
So that's just one of the quotes that we received as part of the consultation, and also shows you the current state of the building inside. That's on the 2nd floor. So there's really a strong sense of community there. There's a strong sense of passion about the building amongst the Rosemount and Glen community, and they really want to see it repurposed. So next slide, please. So I suppose in terms of our future development, some of the stuff that came out of the business plan has been around the bar. The bar's been there a lifetime. So what we've noticed in terms of the responses has been to keep a bar, but also maybe include something like a bar bistro type of thing. So these are some of the images that we've proposed that would look there on the ground floor. Next slide, please. Speaking of some of the organisations there, such as Phoenix Football Club and North West Folk Collective and all, they all have their own spaces at the moment, but they don't intertwine and they don't intermingle with each other. So I suppose a sense of community there would be the type of a multi-purpose hall that all groups could use, that could be used during the day for parents and toddler groups, could be used at night time and for Phoenix Football Club when the Waynes is over playing football, that the older brothers and sisters could be on there doing some other type of training. The enterprise units, so we're looking at part of the proposal would be to demolish the outlying buildings and repurpose them on the social enterprise units and they build some purposeful there. Next slide, please. Student accommodation, so we're proposing on the business plan around the top 2 floors will be repurposed to 100 student accommodation places. These will be single ensuite dorm rooms and will be managed by the Ulster University and they will have a contract with ourselves going forward. Again, the shirt factory museum has been something that's been raised countless times in terms of our heritage here within the city and the significance that it holds and kind of how do we honour the many generations that went through the shirt factory industry. So part of that will be to have a dedicated space. We're lucky that we have Dura dressmakers within the building who are continuing making fashionable items. Liam from Amac Clothing had previously been in the building and was really passionate about having a working shirt factory museum there that could pass on the skills and trades to future generations. Next slide, please.
Okay, so this slide is just highlighting the estimated capital cost for this project. So the first initial investment is the purchase of the Rosemount factory. And this is an indicative figure for the minute, but we are setting that at 1.5 million. The second phase then would be further development of the outlying buildings and renovation and construction, which would be in the region of £3.5 million. And we have currently been in talks with Pride in Place, and they've placed this project in their 10-year plan as a top priority for the Outer West and the Foylside DA. Next slide, please. So ultimately, what is next in store for us is ultimately that we are hoping that the committee will endorse the presentation and approve council's engagement and support on the development of this project within the Foyleside DA. We will then work towards seeking a project sponsor. And in addition to our limited company, we will set up a new project steering committee, which would have senior representatives from a range of different key stakeholders, such as council, the Development Trust, Department for Communities, Department of Education, Ulster University, North West Regional College, Housing Executive, and so on. Once we have set up the project steering committee, then we would the new steering group would agree the terms of reference for the committee. And then we plan to complete a study visit to similar or successful schemes that have significant overlap to this project from other regions. And ultimately, in order to drive this project forward, we would appoint a project manager full-time to develop the project. Thank you.
Carmela Biogaf. Okay, so thanks for that. And I'm just going to open it up to the floor now for any comments or questions. And first of all, we have Councillor Jackson.
Good Chair, and thanks for coming on. I suppose Adrian, you made the presentation to the Peace Plus board, although it has evolved quite a bit since then, but it was an exciting proposal that was put to Peace Plus and was fully endorsed at that stage. We've seen there's a lot of work that's went on it since then, so I want to commend all the organisations that have been working on it up until this point. It's exciting. There's no doubt about that. It's ambitious. There's no doubt about that, but it is achievable. And the one thing that makes it achievable is the university expansion. The university is expanding on the doorstep of this historic building, and it is going to be a catalyst for economic activity. It's going to be a catalyst for the entire Northwest region, and Rosemount and the communities surrounding it should benefit. There's no doubt about that. Chair, you would be only too familiar that this council has endorsed the community wealth building principle as recently as last week. So, and because it is a model that works, it's a model that could work. It's a model that could maximise the potential that exists within our community sector. And I don't want to, or apologies for pointing out the blatantly obvious. The Rosemount factory isn't reaching its potential at the moment. It's an asset. That's in the heart of a community that could be doing a whole lot more. So it's good to see, and I would. It would be a sin to see it continue in its current state, and it would the best people to protect it, to ensure that we get the maximum potential out of it as the local community. So there's the concept of it from our perspective, we fully support it. And if it needs a proposal that we commit council support or endorse the vision, and that we commit council support in any way we can. I'm happy to make that proposal now, Chair. But I do have a few questions in relation to the Foyleside Development Limited Group that's been established, the board. It's in relation to, I know you're meeting with council now and requesting council's endorsement with the vision and requesting council have a senior representative on the steering group. In relation to the rest of the bodies that have been named on there, have you been having conversations with them? What's the feedback been like, or what's the feedback been? And I suppose the following question is, like, there was figures mentioned there of 400 to 500,000 pounds generated as an income. Don't dispute that. And that would go a long way to support the community in the area. But is there what's the governance arrangements to ensure that that money is retained for community use? And I've got every confidence in the current members of the Foyleside Development Incorporation or Limited. But going forward, no, we would need to ensure that governance arrangements are tight to ensure that that money is used for what the community, for community benefit, and to ensure that it doesn't go elsewhere. So, because that like the community wealth building model is exciting, it's creating opportunities, but we need to make sure that it's not abused, and we need to make sure that whatever the ambitions and that have been set out at the very start are retained, and make sure that that there's no abuse of that in any way in the future. So just if there's any clarity, and I might be putting the cart ahead of the horse in relation to this, but I suppose if you can answer those two questions, but Chair, if it requires a proposal at this stage, I'm more than happy on behalf of Sinn Féin to endorse what the presentation that's in front of us. Thanks.
Garmaggot, Councillor Jackson, and I will note that you have proposed this today. Next up is Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome into the chamber today, Adrian and Francis. And the Rosemount factory is indeed an iconic building for people in Rosemount and the Glen and for the city. I grew up next to it. My mum and dad still live right next to it, under its shadow. I had my first job in the village in the Rosemount factory. My mother worked in the shirt factory in there. So, and a lot of people feel a real sense of ownership over it, and are proud about the factory, as they should be. So, and I think that people do want the building restored, redeveloped, regenerated in the best possible way. And I think that that's something that should be welcomed. In terms of some of the proposals, I think there's some very good ideas. Like, I think that a heritage museum about the shirt factory and the history of Rosemount would be absolutely brilliant. And that is something that I think Ulster University should be very eager to get involved in and fund. And that's something I think the council could play a role in as well. And I think that that would be a very, very positive thing. And there's lots of other good ideas in there. And I think lots of good ideas came from the consultation. One thing that has been of concern to me, and I know to a lot of other people, is the issue of student accommodation in the factory. And I believe the corporate position of the council and the task force is not to support large-scale student accommodation slap bang in the middle of residential areas. So I think that that's something that we talked about with the task force when they were in here. That's why we've discussed with them, urging Ulster University to fund large-scale accommodation themselves, not just be reliant on the private sector, but to do that in areas that is not going to overly influence or impact, settled residential areas. And I think that, like, that scale of student accommodation in the middle of Rosemount will have a big impact, because I think it will mean that it'll become known as a student area. There's just no way around that. That's what will happen, and that will have an impact then on the rest of the housing stock, which will then displace people. Now, most of the people that I've talked to have actually agreed with this, and in the consultation that I attended, I mean, there was 18 people at the consultation on the results of it, and my understanding that there was 600 or 700 people that participated in the consultation, but 80 supported student accommodation in the building and another 50 supported some alternative form of accommodation. So that is a real question for me. And Councillor Jackson, are Sinn Féin supporting the proposal for student accommodation? Because you were very enthusiastic about making that proposal today. So you can answer that yourself. Obviously, that's not a question for the people that are in here. But that is a major concern. There's obviously issues about gatekeeping when it comes to community assets. And I like going in the Village Inn. A lot of people do. It would be awful if lots of people who go in there now felt like they could no longer go in there. That would be a shame. The other thing I'm looking at here is the possible price for the sale, 1.5 million. That would be more than $1 million in profit for the owners. That would be my understanding right now. So that's a big chunk of money. I don't know what kind of work's been done in there by the present owners that would justify such a big increase. We are in a situation, going back to housing, where there's people being evicted out of their homes in Crawford Square, settled residents that have lived there for a long time. A lot of them don't know where they're going to go. And this is what happens in a context where we have real housing scarcity, rents through the roof. And I think that's why there's been so much concern around the area around McGee in particular and in Rosemount about the possible impact of student accommodation. So on that, I wouldn't be able to endorse a proposal today that would greenlight the factory becoming very centrally a large-scale student occupation site. So I'd be questions, and obviously if Councillor Jackson wants to respond in particular for Sinn Féin too.
Very good, Councillor Harkin. And next up, we have Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Adrian and Francine for coming in today and taking us through the presentation. Chair, you will know that as a party we supported the motion last week around community wealth building. And I think it's a very interesting concept in terms of supporting community organisations to become self-sustainable. And Francine talked about then the possibility of freeing up other funding for groups who are already underfunded. It makes absolute total sense. When we look at the presentation then, Adrian, you talked about all of the things that's going to be contained within the thoughts and the ideas within the plan around Phoenix Football Club and the multi-use hall, the bar stroke bistro on the bottom floor and all of that. And that's really bringing Rosemount Factory back to life. And I agree with Councillor Jackson around the fact that my little knowledge of Rosemount Factory, obviously not as much as Councillor Harkin's, but my little knowledge of Rosemount Factory is that it isn't reaching its full potential. And when you have such an asset like that within a community, and it is, again, agreeing with Councillor Harkin, such a part of the fabric of that community, we should be doing all we can to see it reach its full potential, absolutely. So community ownership is definitely something that we would support and would be looking at. In relation to the consultation report in 2025, which is referenced here, and Councillor Harkin again touched on it, it does highlight the need or the wishes of the community around accommodation. However, it doesn't, in the consultation report as presented here, it doesn't reference student accommodation as one of the priorities for people in that area. I wonder, could you clear that up for us, please? I did have a question down here around the managed student accommodation, but I think you've touched on it, that's going to be managed by Ulster University. How have you had those conversations? What is that management structure going to look like? Or is it just the fact that you are leaving it to them and what role will you have on it? As part of the presentation and the recommendation, it talks about engagement and support for the project from council, and it talks about a senior member of the council officers being on the board, the project board, what role do you see them carrying out, and what do you feel that as an organisation you will need from them? In terms of the estimated capital costs, it talks about 1.5 million, and I have no idea how much profit that is for the current owner at all. But I would just like to know, and Francine, I think you said that's an indicative figure at the moment. If we could find out how you've come to that figure, or where what that's marked against, that would be useful as well. And then what's next talks about the organisations, and they're all listed there. I'm not going to run through them, who are going to form part of this project group and steering group. What I don't see there is any facilitation, if you like, for community or for local residents. And Francine, as she was finishing, talked about all of the groups being here today and one voice on behalf of Foyleside. I'm aware of at least one residents group who doesn't support this proposal around student accommodation. What engagement have you had with them? Is there a role for them within this project group? And how do you see that going forward? I appreciate that Councillor Jackson has made a proposal. At this stage, I'm not in a position to support that proposal. I'll 100% support most of the ideas that you have around the factory, but it's in terms of the residents' engagement going forward where I have major concerns. And as I say, I know of one group who are not supportive of 100 student accommodation units being on the top floor of the factory. I agree with Councillor Harkin in terms of overpopulation of students in that particular area, and I would prefer that this proposal from Councillor Jackson perhaps may be deferred until full council. Whilst I appreciate that ratification doesn't happen until full council anyway, but that would allow us as a group more time to speak to more people within that community. I believe that this is a good project, but I have some concerns about it, and I would like to do a wee bit of background work before we are being asked as a group today whether to support or not the entirety of the project. So I'll put that to Councillor Jackson as a workaround in the meantime to allow us that bit of time to do extra bit of due diligence on this. But thank you very much for your presentation. A lot of it, as I say, I do support. I do have a concern around the number of units in terms of student accommodation, but hopefully we can see a way around that. I believe that the way we can see around that is with further communication and representation for residents. And at the moment, I don't see that within the presentation, and that's where the concern is coming from. Thank you.
Good, Councillor Tierney. I'm just going to bring back in Councillor Jackson quickly, and then Alderman Cook, I do see you've indicated online as well.
Okay, and I know, I suppose there was a question asked of ourselves and around making the proposal, and I want to say at the outset the concept of community wealth building is something that we're committed to. The expansion of the university is something that we are wholeheartedly committed to, and there's a natural sort of merging of the two, particularly within the Outer West area. And if Foyleside local growth partnerships have come together and identified this as the #1 priority, we support that. And we make no apologies of supporting that. It makes sense. There are people opposed to the expansion of the university. That isn't derailing our vision to expand the university. We've waited 50 years, more than 50 years, for a proper university, and we're committed to make it happen, despite some opposition. But it is happening. We'll make it happen, and we're committed. We're not going to be derailed. I suppose those that are closest to the community are those that are involved in the growth partnerships. If they're coming forward and saying this is the #1 priority in this area, then we support that as being representative of the local area. And that's the basis of our endorsement. But and I suppose what was thrown up there is that we're green lighting the entire plan. What we're doing is endorsing. The proposal was that we endorse the concept, that we endorse council's representation on a steering group. It's yet to be established. So it's very much in its infancy, and that we support the organisation in developing the plans. Throughout all of that, there's going to be various stages of consultation. There's going to be various hurdles or various consultations and hurdles to overcome, but and none more so than the planning process, where there will be extensive consultation and opportunities for communities to feed in. But I appreciate that because I wouldn't want to push this through. If others have requested a bit of space to have conversations, I don't want this project to be divisive. There may be some people that want to make it a divisive issue. It's certainly not our objective. So I have no issue withdrawing the proposal and revisiting it at full council, but I can categorically say, from our perspective, we endorse that what was proposed or what's been presented to the committee today, and that will be our position when we come to full council at the end of the month. But if others need time to explore that, then we're happy. I'm happy to withdraw the proposal, and we'll come back at it. But we'll have a similar stance at the end of the month. But again, just to reiterate that point, is that we're not greenlighting anything at this stage. It's giving council support to grassroots community organisations that want to develop a community wealth building project, and that is my full justification for our support. And if there's other community organisations that come forward with similar community wealth building initiatives, then we would consider them with the exact with an exact same lens. So hopefully that answers the question. But I suppose that the main point is, if others have requested, I'm listening and happy to withdraw the proposal.
Okay, Councillor Jackson, I'll accept that you've withdrawn the proposal at this stage, and we will take that to full council. Just before I know it, what people indicated in the room, but Alderman Cook has been waiting online, and Adrian and Francine have been waiting really patiently to reply to some of the responses. So I'll take Alderman Cook, I'll let Adrian and Francine come in, and then I'll go back to the floor, okay? So Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. And just on behalf of the DEP, we'd like to thank Adrian and Francis for coming in today. Rosemount Factory is a historic building that holds many memories for those who have worked in it, used it, or even live nearby. It's certainly an ambitious plan, but it would be good to see the building used to its full potential, as others have already mentioned. And we would also be interested just to know more about the proposed student accommodation side of things. But no, thanks very much for coming in and talking about the development. So thank you very much.
Garamaga, Alderman Cook, I'll just pass over here to Adrian and Francine, and they can just go through the responses.
Thank you, everybody. I suppose I'll try and go through this as quick as possible. Christopher, just around the Foresight developments. I suppose we set up Foresight developments bearing in mind that GDI is the kind of lead on the tender for Peace Plus, and we wanted to make sure that this was fully inclusive of all our partners within Foresight. So everybody from like BHCP, the Village Hub and GDI all have membership of Foresight Developments. It's a constituted group. It's a limited company by guarantee. Councillor Tierney, I know you referenced another organisation and another group, but everything that we do is fully vetted and it's online, and you can see who's on our groups. There's other groups out there that mightn't be as fully transparent as us. So yep, everything that we do, financial statements and all that will be online for anybody to view. In terms of one of the things was DFC. We've asked DFC to be a sponsor for the project. That's who we would see as kind of coming on to give us the kind of leadership that we need to strengthen foresight developments and take us forward. Bearing in mind, as I said, GDI's kind of been the one with the most proven track record of delivering on projects at this scale. So it might be the case that we take it forward, but then sign it over to foresight developments. But again, that's a process. I'm not a member of foresight developments. I'm just here speaking on their behalf. In terms of the accommodation and the management of it, yep, we have met with Ulster University. Ulster University is supportive of the project. They see in terms of yourselves the benefit of community wealth building within it. That again, this is communities coming together to support each other to ensure that the tax and the threats to the community funding is not going to be there come us having an income. And again, we also met with Department for Communities, and as I said, they're away now to seek to see if they can become a sponsor for the project, taking it forward. Councillor Harkin, in terms of some of the stuff, the costings, again, it's privately owned. It's like when you go to buy a house, somebody will tell you this is what I want for it. It mightn't be what we want to pay for it, but unfortunately, that's the asking price. We will have to carry an independent evaluation of the building, but in terms of the scope of where we're at, we had a limited amount of resources to do this. We've been doing this kind of on top of all our other jobs, and it's just because of the passion that we have for the building. So there is some stuff that is there. We're aware that through Pride and Place we have a capacity budget that we're hoping to tap into as soon as the letter of offer comes from the British government. You referenced around rents and housing, especially around Crawford Square, and I suppose this is a real ambition and a long-term goal we have. The income that we generate from this building will go a long way to readdressing regeneration issues within Rosemount and the Glen. We have a massive issue of HMOs. You have debated it for long enough in this chamber. We have a proposal here that will reduce the HMO stock within Rosemount. It'll allow us to become a developer and buy up properties in that area. They put families back into Rosemount. They have affordable rents. They have a quality of housing. We only have to look on social media today to see there's housing out there with damp, with mould. We want to ensure that our properties and properties around Rosemount becomes a vibrant community to come back to again. Councillor Tierney, I suppose again, big thing around community wealth building. It's a new way to go here. We're part of the prospectus for the Northwest. We sit on the Community Wealth Building Task Force along with council and a number of other community organisations. Again, we're constantly seeing threats to groups. Pink Ladies, Enoch Youth Forum on the streets have all had a reduction in funding and a threat of closing the doors. I suppose ourselves are seeing that and we're saying, well, where are we going to be in the next 5 years? We're vital community organisations within these areas and we need to remain open. But we can't always rely on grant funding. We can't always just be waiting for the big lottery or DFC or council to step in. So we need to identify how do we attract that income. And I suppose everybody has mentioned the Rosemount factory and its potential, but it hasn't been fully utilised since it's a shirt factory. There's been businesses in there, there's been other operations that's happened on it. So I suppose for ourselves, the business plan has indicated that there's going to be some form of accommodation. The accommodation that we can control the most is students. Students will be there for a certain period of months throughout the year. They will then leave. They will have Ulster University telling them if there's any bad practice or you must police yourself with our code of conduct, you'll be removed from the property and your degree. Unfortunately, if we go down the social housing route, those options aren't there. It's going to be a lot harder process. So we see that students also hold a value. They come there with an economic background that they're going to invest in shops and cafes and bars and around the Rosemount area, and that again will help to regenerate that community. And I suppose this has been the main driver for the Rosemount factory is the opportunity that's there to really regenerate the entire community, but also take over the building and have it as a community asset. around the kind of the price. So we have a price set and we have a date set, and the date is the end of June. So again, you asked around the indicative price that may rise if it's not met by that date. So we just have to kind of now lobby and see if we can achieve the asking price, and then that'll become our asset, and then it's up to us then to take care of it and the maintenance of it and the control of it. The engagement with CRAM, we've certainly engaged with them. I was speaking to members of CRAM during the week. They sit on our task force in terms of community renewal. We engage with them there. We're engaging with them at the McGee task force or the McGee community engagement meetings, which Councillor Harkin and Councillor Grace sits at. So there's ongoing engagement. Again, we've outlined our vision of here's the long-term plan, and I suppose that comes on the back of our engagement with community partners in Belfast around the Holy Lands, and what we've seen is sizable numbers of students that moved out of the Holy Lands and went to York Street. And what has happened within those communities, there's houses that no longer have occupation because the HMO licence cannot be sold with the property. There's issues around temporary accommodation, transient populations, and I suppose as a community organisation, we don't want to see that within our community. We want to see a vibrant community for young people, older people, people that want to live there, students who decide, I want to make Derry my city to live in, I want to make Rosemount my community, and that will help drive again community wealth building. It's not just about the assets, it's about the people we have in communities. I suppose engagement, we have engaged with Sinn Féin and we've engaged with SDLP over previous weeks. We have a number of other engagements they do too. So I suppose we met with Mark and Sinead and they were both very supportive of the project. So that's hopefully answered most of the questions. If there's anything I've missed, far away, I'll try and address them.
Carmagate, Adrian, August Francine. So next up we have Councillor Harkin. Were you wanting back in?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Adrian and Francine, again for being in. And just to go back to Councillor Jackson's response, look, I mean, we passed a motion last week supporting community wealth building, so I don't think that there's anybody in the council that voted for that is in opposition. I don't think that this is about opposition to McGee expansion, but I think that McGee expansion has to be beneficial to communities and to those who want to see McGee expand. And I know that there's been frustration from people, particularly who live around the university, around HMOs and the way that the university initially talked about how to meet a student accommodation need, which was to encourage HMO building. And there's been a lot of pushback against that. And that's why we've debated the cap in the council. So I think the issue that I'm raising is specifically about student accommodation, right? And obviously we put this discussion off now to the next full council. And I don't think that, I really hear kind of what Adrian is arguing in terms of the need to fund and defend community organisations, because there are real fears. I mean, it's, you know, there's a protest this week. Action Mental Health is organising it about the big cut that's coming to the local through the local growth fund, and there, you know, there's a whole set of other cuts as well that are hitting organisations very badly. And I think that the pressures that are on community and voluntary sector groups is absolutely terrible, and people are not appreciated for the work that they do. I think that that's absolutely true. So I think that, like, if we were talking about a building in the middle of Rosemount for 100 student units, I don't think there would be any support for it. I mean, that's just because I think that the discussions that we've had around the evidence, it will lead to, in my opinion, displacement of the actual community that you want to serve. And that's happened elsewhere. And there's also all the other issues with congestion. Now, that doesn't mean that, like, the factory shouldn't or won't be regenerated. The factory there was proposals for this factory to be completely regenerated well before university expansion became a reality. So I don't think that this is tied to that. or tied to the need to put students in there. I think that if there's some people who are opposed to any kind of accommodation in there, I would be open to social housing. I think there's a desperate need for it. I think that also the Western Trusts are desperate to find places for residential care sites. I don't know if that is a discussion or if the building would be appropriate, but that could be something to consider around, that would be a real, that would fit as well in terms of the community. So, look, there's another discussion about becoming a developer of housing, because in my opinion, that's the housing executive's job and housing associations. And I think that the creation of more housing providers will raise additional questions, even if it's well intentioned. So that's for another time, but that is part of what you that's part of the proposal. But these things don't have to all go together. But look, there's a lot of really good. I think the repurposing, the regeneration of the factory is absolutely needed, and I think that that will be, very much welcomed. And there's a lot of things that can be done with the factory to make it as positive for the people in the area and for the city and for the council to support as well.
Okay, Councillor Jenny.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our guests for answering the questions posed to them. I want to acknowledge the fact that Councillor Jackson has removed the proposal, but in his response, he said, if people want to make this divisive, I want to be clear, we are not trying to make this divisive at all. I don't think he was talking about the SDLP, but we don't want to make this divisive, which was the reason behind the suggestion they remove it, because there is a massive amount of this proposal which we are for. There's a part where we have a question on, and we want to make sure that we have asked those questions both of ourselves, of others within the community, and in time, and hopefully before full council of you as well, which will help us and become to full council with an informed, a better informed position. So we're not trying to be divisive at all. The community wealth building, I already spoke about it, support it. It's just that one wee query around the number of units. And in relation to that, and I know in the presentation it talks about 100 units. Does the success or future of this project lie on that figure of 100? Or have you considered reducing that to any level? And if so, what level do you think makes this project unsustainable? Thank you.
Okay, I just want to come back on that.
I suppose, Councillor Tierney, again, the scale of the profit. So the student accommodation really covers the rest of the building. We don't see the bar, the bistro, the multi-purpose room, all that generating a profit. We're a community organisations here. We're not going to be charging Phoenix Football Club £50 an hour for coming and use a hall. The Vineyard Church on a Sunday isn't going to be charged the same kind of commercial rates. We have to be cognizant of the fact that we're who we are and where we are. So I suppose that's why we need the type of accommodation, and we need the student accommodation to really grow. The scale back of it, yes, but the scale back of it then drastically reduces our income generation, and then our income generation doesn't allow us to purchase HMOs, doesn't allow us to protect funding attacks on groups, doesn't allow us to sponsor some of the clubs in and around the area and ensure that they have a quality of life. That's what we're trying to do with this income. So, 100 students, Councillor Harkin mentioned that Rosemount is not seen maybe as a student area. It is. There's probably 300-400 students at the minute in Rosemount and houses across the area. How many of them are going to leave over the next couple of years when we see the large scale purpose-built student accommodations happen, and then what happens to those properties? So we need to look and see what we can do as community organisations, what we can do as council, what we can do as elected members for the area to really regenerate this area and protect it, and hopefully in 10 years' time see that kind of dividend paying off.
Gramila Mayogov, and I just on a personal note, just want to commend you for coming in today, and for community organisations in the Outer West for getting together and to strategically think of how they can move forward in the face of ongoing cuts to different organisations and threats of like 1 year and 2 year and 3 year contracts. I really do commend that and can't not say that after me putting through a community wealth building motion last week. So listen, we will discuss this further at full council, but I do really, and on behalf of the council, I do really appreciate you coming in and giving us that presentation today. Okay, and sorry for keeping you so long as well. All right, moving on to chairperson's business then. I didn't receive any chairperson's business from anybody, but I have a few wee bits that I just want to bring up myself. First of all, without putting Paula on the spot, this is Paula's last committee. Paula is retiring at the ripe old age of 25. Fair play, Paula. So on behalf of the Chair of Governance, I would like to wish you well in your retirement. Sorry for embarrassing you by bringing it up today, but we couldn't miss you, and I'll open it up to the floor. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair. I was shocked when you said 25. I thought you was only 24. But Paula, on behalf of the SDLP group in this council, thank you very much for all of your work and all of your support. I'm sure you'll enjoy your retirement and you'll be looking forward to it. But thank you very much, and we wish you a long and happy retirement. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Good Chair, and Paula, on behalf of Champagne, I just want to wish you all the best. It seemed not too long ago where Paula informed us that she intended to retire. But at that stage, it seemed a long way off, and we thought that there was plenty of time for you to change your mind. So from our perspective, we're devastated that there wasn't enough time to allow you to change your mind. But we wish you all the best. It was a privilege to be working along with you, and you will certainly be missed. And there's big shoes to fill. So on behalf of us, thank you and all the best.
And online, Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me on, and just to be associated with the comments there, and on behalf of the EP group, that we would be, we're very sad to see Paula go, and we wish her every success in the future. So, thank you, Chair.
And Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for letting us all know today is Paula's last day. And Paula, thank you very much for all the help and support and work that you've done here. You will be missed, but I'm sure you've thought about this a lot and are looking forward to it. And we wish you the best for your retirement, and I'm sure you'll have some great plans figured out there. So all the best, and thank you.
Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Chair. Keith already come in, but yeah, on behalf of the DP, we just like to wish you, Paula, a happy retirement.
Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and apology for late arrival. Paula, sincere thanks for all of your work up to now. It is sad that you find that, from our perspective, that you're retiring from this particular aspect, but I'm sure there's plenty more that will be filling your time as you go forward. And sincere best wishes going forward. Enjoy. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't the first role that I actually worked with Paula. We used to work in Tesco together about, God, I'm not even going to say it, but it's a long, long time ago. So I wish Paula all the best in her retirement, and you're still allowed to come in here during public business, and you can still watch it on YouTube. So if you get bored during your retirement.
Okay, Garamayogov. So, yeah, Paula, thanks again. And I know this is your last committee. It's not your last day. You still have to come in tomorrow, but your last committee. So just had to mark it. Okay, so moving from that on to something a wee bit more serious. I just want to raise the recent attack on Iran and the effects and the impacts that has had in our local areas on oil prices, and the potential rise in gas prices that may be coming down the line as well. There is real concern over this act of aggression against Iran. And, you know, we have been contacted, I'm sure everybody in this council chamber has been contacted by residents who are really worried about, you know, the hike in oil prices and diesel and gas. And I just, as chair of governance, I would like to invite the Consumer Council the Consumer Council to come in to council, potentially to this committee as soon as possible, so that we can talk about what controls could potentially be put in place to protect the prices. And I would like this to be done ASAP, or I'd like them to come in ASAP. Just to sort of educate us and give us the chance to explore and challenge, you know, what we could do going forward as local councillors in terms of these massive price hikes. Okay, Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose just to agree, I mean, it was all over the news this morning about local oil companies and gas companies putting their prices up already, despite the wholesale price hasn't gone up already. So it'd be great to get them in as soon as possible, so that we know who to direct people to and how we can do this to help people manage their money going forward. I suppose it's important too that you've raised it, just to kind of condemn the attacks and condemn what has happened, this act of aggression. Like you say, it's more beating of the war drums, and it's not what's needed. No one, well, I assume nobody would disagree that what needed to happen was that needed to be overthrown in Iran, but this is not the way to do it. I'll continue to say that Israel and Donald Trump do not have the right to go in and drop bombs on innocent civilians, no matter how bad the leaders are there. Two bad things don't make a good thing. So I just want to put our comments from the SLP's perspective that we would be calling for peace, for diplomacy, and for talking this through, rather than creating another war in the Middle East. If history taught us anything, the UK getting involved in this is not going to end well. So, but I totally agree and endorse your invitation to the Consumer Council, and thank you very much.
Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to discuss this today, because it is dominating what a lot of people are thinking about across the world. And fresh from the United States and Israel's Gaza genocide, they're now bombing yet another country and murdering lots and lots of innocent people. And I think people all over the world are worried about, are we heading to a global conflict? Because the level of uncertainty is huge, and it is a very, very dangerous moment for obviously people underneath the bombs that Trump and Netanyahu are dropping, but also people right across the Middle East and across the world. And yeah, I've already, as I'm sure you have yourself, I've started to have conversations with people talking about spikes in the price of their energy costs, and obviously the war may have a big impact on that in terms of the distribution of energy from the Middle East. But it's also the case that a lot of companies have just engaged in price gouging whenever they get the opportunity. And that may already be happening. So I really endorse your proposal to bring in the Consumer Council to have a conversation, because in the past, I think that safeguards were very, very weak. When we had an energy crunch here, there was very little that was done by the regulator to protect people. So I think if we can urge them to do more right now, that'll be welcomed by a lot of people. So fully support your proposal.
Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, Cormac, Chair, and I suppose given that this is the first meeting of council since the attack on Iran, it is only right that you raise it, and I would imagine we've all been inundated with people concerned around energy prices as a result. It's only been a few days and prices have skyrocketed. There's many people that was, and it was alluded to earlier in our presentation, there's people within our council area that are in energy, or that are in fuel poverty. They were in fuel poverty before these massive price hikes, and I suppose it's got to a stage now where energy or fuel has become unattainable for some people, and that's a stark reality. So it is right that we try and tease that out, and we challenge that in any way we can. And the most logical first step is to have that conversation with the Consumer Council. They educate ourselves, get as much information as we can, and they represent the people that we were elected to represent. I suppose to go back on the attack at Iran, and I know this council has been highlighting the genocide that was carried out by Israel for years now, and this is a continuation of that. There was a test of the world's humanity in Gaza, and it looks as if this rogue state has tested to see how far, or see what they could get away with, and they got away with like international law. They've completely ignored and broke international law on numerous occasions. Carried out a war against an innocent population, and they've got away with it. They've been able to break international law at their one, and because they've got the support of Donald Trump. And this has led to that. If international law was enforced, we would have seen this curtailed at the start. And now the fact that they've continued, they've carried on an act of aggression on Iran, it won't stop there. There'll be other countries that they'll go after next. These bloodthirsty regimes need to be stopped. International law needs to be enforced, and that's a stark reality, and it's very worrying times. And I'm delighted. I'm glad that you raised it under Chairperson's presence today, because it's apt at the first meeting of council since this act of the most recent act of aggression, that we get the opportunity to raise it, highlight the concerns of many people throughout our city and district currently have, and then the knock-on consequences of what's been described as price gouging, and I wouldn't dispute that in any way. So it would be very useful for us to have that, and our trusted officers will try and get that arranged or explored at the earliest opportunity. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Jackson. Okay, it's 6 o'clock now. I'm gonna call, oh, sorry, was there somebody else looking in there? No? Quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come back in and get into the bones of the meeting, okay? Ash, well, Chair Ash, we're moving on to agenda item number 8, which is the matters arising from the open minutes of governance and strategic planning held on the 3rd of February 2026. Any matters arising? Councillor Harkin?
Chair, look, yesterday and today, I'm sure other people seen this, but there was a young family in a house in the Bogside, and there was really awful mould and damp. Absolutely shocking, to be quite honest. And there is far too many examples that we've talked about here in the council of mould and damp that doesn't get addressed. I think that the figures that the housing executive have are somewhere close to 15,000 reports of damp and mould over the last year, and that doesn't include housing associations or private landlords either. So the issue of damp and mould has been a massive one. And last Monday in the Stormont Assembly, my colleague Jerry Carroll brought forward a motion calling on the...
Councillor Harkin, can you just refer to where it's coming from the minutes from last month?
Oh, sorry, GSP 30.
GSP 30. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My colleague Jerry Carroll brought a motion to the Stormont Executive calling for the Communities Minister to immediately implement a version of AWAB's law here in the north. Now, AWAB was a 2-year-old who died because of damp and mould, creating very serious respiratory problems for him. And it was an absolute tragedy. And this spotlighted the issue of damp and mould in housing across England and Britain. And there's no legislation there to begin to address this. We haven't brought in any legislation to that effect. But last Monday, this motion was agreed across the House, and it now means that the Communities Minister will be called upon to urgently implement it. I would like us as a council, given the concerns that many of our residents have brought to us about mould and damp that have went unaddressed, to welcome this as a council. To finally get this legislation put in place so it can be implemented, but they also call on the Minister now to actually not sit in his hands any longer. He needs to implement this legislation that will begin to protect tenants from mould, damp and disrepair. If I can propose that today, Chair, I would like to do that, and I'll send a short proposal to Paula. Might be the last one I send you, Paula.
Sorry, what is the proposal? Just, it might be better as a motion in full council, given the importance of the issue.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the proposal is to basically welcome that this legislation has been agreed now in Stormont, and as a council to call on the Minister to act on it.
I'll accept it at this stage, Councillor Harkin, but I do think that it would be a good issue for full council as well. I'll open up to the floor to see if anybody, Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, well, in absence of seeing the proposal, but based on what Councillor Harkin has said, I'm content to second it, but I'm going to reserve that until I see the final wording. But there's no doubt that issues with mould, damp is a major concern within our council area. Where I'm currently working with a family in the Waterside who are experiencing issues with mould and damp. Mould that's arising because of damp conditions in an unsuitable property that has led to respiratory issues for a child who's only a couple of months old. So there's, and that's not suitable. It's not something that we can ignore and will ignore. And the fact that, as Councillor Harkin has outlined, there has been a motion that's been passed at the Assembly. I'm calling on the Communities Minister to take action, and that now's the time, and the people that we represent in this city and district deserve suitable accommodation. They deserve accommodation that's fit for purpose, and they deserve accommodation that isn't going to have a detrimental impact on their health or the health of their children. So on that basis, and again, without seeing the wording, or working on the assumption that Councillor Harkin, and I'm just reading it. Based on the wording on the screen, we're content to second it and support the proposals in front of us. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Jackson, Alderman Kerrigan, I see you've declared an interest online here. Do you still want to come in, or was it just to declare that interest?
Just very briefly, Chair. Again, I have declared an interest in regards to the Housing Council and Northern Housing Council, Northern Housing Executive. But this was raised. We had a meeting. The Housing Executive met with the Minister last Wednesday, and that was one of the items that was raised. And the fact that this has been passed at Stormont, and the Minister is very keen to push this legislation through with other executive colleagues at the executive. So this is on the radar, and this is being dealt with. So I'm hoping I have no issue with a letter coming from council to support it and to seek this as implementation. But it is something which the Minister is working with, particularly the Housing Executive, and is well aware of, and will be pushing forward. And we trust that we'll have the support for the legislation when it does come at Stormont. Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me in.
Okay, Carmarket and Councillor Tierney. Sorry, and I do see your hand online there as well, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. I think it was, I've seen people clutching at straws to get things in, but this, I think the Chair has been very fair to Councillor Harkin on this instance, to be honest. But however, the proposal has been tabled. We have no issue in supporting it based on what is, like most people out and about didn't see this motion going through the Assembly. But I'm more than happy to support what's there, because this is about, and if legislation comes in, this will be about improving the quality of life that people across this district and across the north have, who are already living in damp and mouldy houses. So if there's legislation going to be coming to correct that, I don't think it needs legislation for a landlord to live up to their commitments as a landlord and to be providing suitable, comfortable accommodation. But if that's the road, unfortunately, that we have to go down, then the SDLP are happy to support that. I would wonder in terms of the letter, and I hope that you don't suggest that this needs an amendment, but in terms of the letter, could we be putting on a line or a question around the likelihood of this legislation passing before the end of this mandate, or even being tabled before the end of this mandate? Otherwise, a letter to the current Minister for Communities may be a waste of our time and theirs, because we don't know who that may be after or in the next mandate of the Assembly. Hopefully, Chair, that doesn't need an amendment, but if we could put something along those lines in. But in terms of the wider proposal before us, we're happy to support it. Thank you.
Councillor Tierney, and you're right, it was clutching at straws, but given that I knew that it wasn't going to be a contentious subject and that it was just very simple, straightforward, I just thought, it's really important. I will bring in Alderman Hussey now.
Thank you, Chair. And I agree it has been brought in through a narrow gap, but then I'm quite akin to doing that myself. So I appreciate that you've accepted the motion and have absolutely no problem in supporting the motion. And it refers to landlords. Alderman Kerrigan has referred to one of the major landlords, namely the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, but the private landlords need to be brought to account as well on this. They have a responsibility. Not all live up to that responsibility, and Councillor Tierney has alluded to that. And like Councillor Tierney, I have a concern, because now and again we're being told by some in the executive that there's no longer assembly time to bring legislation forward within the current mandate. So that's something that has to be taken on board. I personally can't understand that whenever you're talking about legislation which is already in place in another part of the United Kingdom, and why there cannot be a means of fast tracking that legislation comparatively through to Northern Ireland, but that's another case. That said, I fully support the motion that is there, and thank Councillor Harkin for bringing it. Thank you, Chair.
Alderman Hussey. Okay, Councillor Harkin, are you happy to add in a line there just in terms of it being within this mandate instead of us having to make an amendment to the proposal?
Happy to do that, Chair. I suppose the language could just say, and to provide clarification as to when it would be implemented.
Councillor Tierney.
Thank you. That's not the question that I was asking. Not to provide clarification. I want to know, is there space and time in this mandate to get this legislation through? Not for a minister to write back and say, well, we don't know what that timeline looks like. I want a simple yes or no around this mandate. Not your questions a wee bit more open and allows people in offices in Belfast to be flexible with the truth. I want a simple yes or no. So that language wouldn't suit me, to be honest.
Does Councillor Tierney want to just clarify the language? Because I'd be happy to support whatever it is.
Can we just take 2 minutes, and if you just want to have a quick discussion there and then put the changed wording on the screen?
Okay, Chair, if we can, Paula, if you don't mind, if we can just change the last part of it for to implementation of this legislation within the current Stormont mandate.
If it makes it easier, Chair, through you, Paula, I've emailed it to you. What we think? It's very straightforward, but might make it a wee bit easier.
Just to let members online know that we're just having a technical issue at the minute, so should be sorted soon. Okay, we have a proposal on the screen now. Everyone happy? Councillor McGinley, were you wanting to come in on the back of that proposal?
Just on a minor point of accuracy, Chair, the debate in the Assembly was on the 24th of February. So I would just rather that any proposal that we're putting forward is accurate. So if we can get that updated.
Councillor McGinley? Okay, so that's unanimous. And is there any more matters arising? Are there any more matters arising? No. Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 9, and Philip is going to take us through that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members, this is simply seeking your comments and support for the adoption of an asset acquisition and disposal policy and the associated guidance. So members, basically this policy pulls together all of the various bits and pieces of guidance and legislation into a single document to provide clarity and transparency in relation to the way in which the Council deals with assets and disposals. In part 3 of the report, members have set out basically the different sections of the policy, which is at Appendix 1. Key points, members, you'll see that Section 2 provides for the establishment of a cross-directorate office or working group to consider all acquisitions and disposals and hopefully streamline process. Section 3 will set out the aims of the policy, and the various definitions are set out in Section 4. The operative parts are at Section 5, which start at Section 5, with Section 5 dealing with the procedures to be followed in relation to the acquisition of property. Disposals are dealt with at Section 6, and members, you'll see that that includes disposals that are to be taken place by mechanisms such as community asset transfer. The guidance is intended, hopefully, to ensure that there's simple and easy to understand access to the policy, both for officers not intimately involved in it and also for elected members. So members, happy to take any questions in relation to the draft policy or the guidance.
Philip and Councillor Money.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Philip for the presentation. The SLP group, I think this is a very welcome paper to be brought in, and a very welcome policy, based on the fact is that we are dealing with asset acquisition, i.e. land and property. I think this provides a degree of certainty for members, for officers, and more importantly for members of the public who wish to come under the council and who wish to purchase or sell or whatever type of acquisitions, especially in relation to land and other disposals. I think probably in the past there might have been not a lack of certainty, but I think this document consolidates everything into one coherent policy. I like the idea that there's an officer board that will examine any initial proposal and then bring it forward to committee based on that there. And I think this is a welcome addition to the suite of policies that Council currently have in relation to these issues. So I'm happy to propose that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Philip, for the report. And happy to second the proposal from Councillor Money. There's many community organisations, and I suppose it fits in the theme of the meeting around community wealth building and empowering our communities. So, and I'm aware of a number of instances where there's community organisations that have aspirations, and council have assets that are surplus to requirements. So it makes sense in that regard. But there may be other organisations that have aspirations, but aren't aware of the fact that council may have assets that are surplus to requirements, or they're not aware of land ownership or titles and all of that. So, and I know it might be a separate piece of work in relation to this, but could we explore developing a list of council assets that would be readily available upon request to community organisations that are interested in community asset transfers? So I suppose just as a follow-on from this this policy, it may spark conversations within community groups or sporting organisations. So if there was a piece of work done, carried out, that was readily available upon request, it would be extremely useful. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, I'm happy to come back on that. Yeah, that's actually a piece of work which has already started across the public sector. Generally, there is a push to put in place a centralised list of surplus assets. So happy to take that forward.
Hey, Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in. And to be fair, one of the questions Councillor Jackson has just touched upon, because it's assessing what assets we actually do have as a council overall. Because just I do note the elements in regards to the policy there, and the disposal and the community asset transfer there. But it is a thing that has, I know, has been raised in regards to the Housing Council and the Housing Executive, and even in the meeting that was last Wednesday with the DFC Minister, whereby he did make mention of if other departments cannot provide him financial gain or financial monies in regards to development within DFC, he would take land. And it's a thing then that has been raised there. If councils or other government departments do have surplus land that may well be used as potential for housing development. So I'm just wondering, in regards to the element of the policy, will that also fall under that community asset transfer potentially? You know, in regards to disposing of, if there was surplus land within the council, to the like of the body in the format of the Housing Executive, or the body in the format of the like of DFC, is that still applicable in regards to this current policy that you're seeking to get brought forward, Philip, or would it need to change, or is that just a technicality? Thank you, Chair.
I'm not sure it's dealt with specifically in this particular policy, Alderman Kerrigan. The manner in terms of funding disposals is that the disposals have to be done at best value without ministerial, other than with ministerial approval. But I'm happy to discuss that with you, to look at that and bring further a paper in due course if appropriate.
Thanks for that, Philip. And Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Philip. I'm sure there's quite a bit of work has gone into this. I'm always weary when I hear policies being developed and wondering, does it actually enhance processes? When I look at this from a private business perspective, and how quickly I can make a decision, and how quickly the corporate body can make a decision, and that is always a concern for the public. The length of time it takes to actually do something. In Philip's opinion, does this provide the opportunity to speed up the process, so that from initiation to action, you know, there is not an interminable gap? Thank you.
Certainly, the policy is intended to ensure that there aren't interminable gaps. The process within local government is slower than in the private sector. There's no avoiding that because of the notice requirements that we have for committee and council papers, etc. But yes, I think this will actually speed up the process overall.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Philip.
Okay, councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair. And just a question for Philip. I mean, I think that the proposals are appropriate, and I'm wondering, is this something being done across all councils? Was this prompted by the work that you says is being carried out at a I suppose at a Stormont level to look at the possible disposable of statutory body properties and lands and so on?
Some councils have these policies in place and some councils don't. This wasn't specifically inspired by work that was being done at other councils, but you're correct. Certainly in what you say, there is work, as I say, being done across the public estate in terms of regularising the position in relation to assets and disposals, developing lists of surplus land, etc., and making sure that those things are dealt with in an open and transparent way. And all of that has informed and fed into the policy that's been developed and prepared here today.
Okay, thanks, Philip. So that was proposed by councillor Minnie and seconded by councillor Jackson. Okay, moving on to item number 10, and it is Ellen.
You Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek members' comments and approval to release for public consultation the draft improvement objectives for 26-27. As set out in the report, we're obliged to annually consult on our improvement objectives through Part 12 of the Local Government Act. And indeed, last year we had 4 improvement objectives which came before members. These objectives have been reviewed and in the context also of the 4th Statement of Progress against the Inclusive Strategic Plan, stakeholder feedback, progress to date learning and the views of the Northern Ireland Audit Office. So subsequently we're putting forward for 26-27 5 improvement objectives which are outlined in the paper at 3.1. And as you can see, 3 of the existing ones have been updated and 2 new objectives added, with 1 being removed to replace and enhance strategic effectiveness. You'll note from the report as well that there isn't a screening attached to this particular report, but the rationale for that is that the results of the consultation process will inform both the screening and the draft corporate and improvement plan that will be brought forward for members' consideration. It's probably May, June of this year, and indeed that then will be screened at that stage. The recommendation then in front of members is that, subject to your comments, approval is given to begin a consultation exercise as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Alan, does anybody have anything they want to ask or any comments on that? No? Okay, so we need a proposer and a seconder for that piece. Proposed councillor Tierney and seconded councillor Minnie. Okay, Ellen, and you also have agenda item number 11 there.
Yeah, and this report presents to members for consideration and approval the Directorate Delivery Plan for the Strategic Planning and Support Services for 26-27. And again, as I would remind members that these plans form part of our planning and improvement framework, along with our strategic community plan, local community plans, the corporate plan and our performance improvement plan. There is a standardised template for each of these plans, and they set out the purpose of the directorate, services provided, resources, achievements, and the delivery elements for the forthcoming year. As I say, in terms of the key issues, it's an important document and it helps communicate and cascade the council's objectives as set out in the corporate plan, and they're also an important element in delivering continuous improvement. So the documents, as I say, are set out at Appendix 1 there, and along with that the screening documentation for it. And the recommendation for members this afternoon is that, subject to your comments, again, the strategic planning and support delivery plan for 26-27 is approved. Thank you, members.
Okay, any comments or questions on that agenda piece? Councillor Farrell?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Ellen, for the report. I'd just like to thank, on behalf of the SDLP, the entire team at Council. When we look at the achievements in the past year, just the sheer volume is really, really impressive. And when we look at the sort of, and I'm going to focus specifically on capital projects because that's That's what I'm Andy. Just how ambitious the capital project list is for next year in terms of construction, in terms of design, development, procurement, etc. So from a city perspective, we've got the city deal projects, the inclusive future projects, Templemore, Maritime Museum at Edmonton. We've got the really exciting public realm project in the Bogside. We've got pitches at Foyle Arena, Lee Fair, Bishop's Field, play parks across the city and district, and long overdue lighting schemes at Drumahoe, Out the Line and Bay Road. So those projects, once delivered, are going to transform local communities. So we've got a busy and exciting year ahead. So looking forward to it.
Councillor Farrell, just on that one as well, are you proposing it? Yeah. Okay, it's proposed by Councillor Farrell. Councillor Jackson?
Yeah, happy to second, and I know the ambitions that we set out to achieve a number of years ago are coming to fruition, and we're entering into the delivery phase. And that sort of you can't overstate this. The fact that officers have been able to progress the ambitious plans alongside delivering all our council services at the same time, and that's demonstrated within that report, and it'll be demonstrated right across all the service delivery plans throughout all the directorates. But again, like Councillor Farrell, focusing on the capital projects because they are additional. They're the normal council services. It's impressive, but again, it's a culmination of many years of work, years of aspirations, of a vision that we're finally entering into the delivery phase. And I suppose this is the most crucial phase. And I know there's a hell of a lot of work to do between now and the completion of our capital, our suite of capital projects. But I'm confident, we're confident that the team that we've got in place are capable to deliver, and they've demonstrated that to get us to this stage. And I suppose from our perspective, we're fully committed to the delivery of these projects, and we're here to support officers in any way we can to get the projects completed and over the line. Go on, my chair.
Okay, Garmaga, Councillor Jackson. So no other comments on that one. Okay, so on to where are we now? Number 12. And Ellen again.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks members' approval to a proposed draft schedule of meetings for 26-27. As you can see from, okay, thank you.
Proposed by Councillor Farrell and seconded by Councillor Tierney. So number 13 then, Ellen.
Yeah, again, this one is to seek approval for the updated citizen recognition policy. And by way of background, members will remember that at the January 26th meeting of the council, the motion set out at 2.1 was actually passed. I would also highlight to members that in terms of the background as well, before this motion or any motion for that matter is advanced, all potential resource, financial and equality impacts will be scoped and brought before a subsequent committee for decision. Consequently, as I say, in terms of this motion, the policy has been updated and is reflected at Appendix 1. We've also undertaken a screening of that revised policy, and it's set out at Appendix 2. And the recommendation in front of members today is that members approve the updated policy. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Jackson.
This was debated at length when the mayor proposed this motion, and we're happy. We were happy at that time to support it, unsurprisingly, and we're happy to support it today. So content to propose on behalf of Sinn Féin.
Garmaga, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Ellen for the report. Similar to Councillor Jackson, we made our feelings around this clear at the January full council meeting, and that hasn't changed. The motion then called for an update in the policy. This is what we have in front of us, so I'm happy to second the proposal or the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, Carmel, Councillor Tierney. Any other comments on that one? Alderman Hussey, and sorry, I just noticed Councillor McGinley had put in to second it, but sorry, I only seen that after Councillor Tierney seconded it, so we'll just bring in Alderman Hussey now.
Thank you, Chair. Members will remember that I had expressed concerns at the way we were taking that through. I'd preferred the working group to be recalled, but it is the motion is there. Sorry, the recommendation is there. I accept that that is the recommendation, but I will abstain from the vote. Thank you.
Garmaggot, Councillor or Alderman Hussey. So we have one abstention there, but apart from that, do we have any other? No, everybody else is happy to.
Chair,
Yep.
it's Alderman Cook. I'll be abstaining as well.
Garmaggot, Alderman Cook. And anybody else online want to raise anything before we move on from this? No, okay, so we have two abstentions, one from Alderman Cook and one from Alderman Hussey, and everybody else is in support. Okay. Okay, the next items from 14 to 18, they're all open for information. So does anybody want to bring up any particular agenda item? No? Okay. I'm just noticing there Alderman Kerrigan came in to say that he wanted to abstain on that. Okay. So just 3 abstentions now. Okay, so we are going to go into confidential. If I can get a proposer and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Mooney and Councillor Jackson.